All right, let's talk about some terminologies of Azure Active Directory now. What is an Azure AD tenant? Now, Azure Active Directory is a directory service that Microsoft uses to authenticate and authorize users to various applications and resources that they are subscribed to. That's the definition of Azure Active Directory. Now, when you create an Azure, when Microsoft or when you create an association with Microsoft to use its Azure services, Microsoft also provides you a tenant of its directory service or authorization solution or Azure AD. So Microsoft gives you a tenant, and inside that tenant, you basically create authentication for your users. You leverage authentication for your users. So either you subscribe to Office 365 or you directly subscribe to Azure. You will get an Azure Active Directory tenant, and inside that tenant, you can create your users, you can create your groups, you can use that tenant to synchronize on-premises identities with your Azure Active Directory, and you can manage the authentication and authorization. That's Azure AD tenant. Azure AD tenant is dedicated to an account. So an Azure account, for example, when you have uh, redeemed your Microsoft, the Azure sponsorship pass that I provided you, when you have redeemed it, the moment you have redeemed it, Microsoft has created an account in its Active Directory for your credentials, the credentials that you have provided, your email address and password. And Microsoft at the same time has allocated a tenant of its tenant of Azure Active Directory so that you can use that tenant for the authentication and authorization of your internal resources and employees. So that's tenant. So tenant represents an organization in Azure Active Directory, and this organization belongs to a customer, a user. A tenant is dedicated to Azure AD instance. A tenant is automatically created when you sign up for either Microsoft Azure, Microsoft Intune, Microsoft 365. A tenant is created that is assigned to your account. Each Azure AD tenant is distinct and separate from other Azure AD tenants. So it is the same directory service, which is Azure Active Directory, which Microsoft uses, and Microsoft says thousands of, hundred thousands of customers as we speak today. How is Microsoft differentiating that this tenant belongs to this customer, this tenant belongs to this customer, or this user belongs to this tenant or this customer? Through the tenant. So every tenant is distinct. This is like, this is like there's a big building and that building has multiple rooms inside, and each room is allocated to one organization. And each room is distinct from each other. You cannot see what's there in the other room, and your employees belongs to that room only. That's tenant. So it is the same directory system. At the end, at the top, it is the same directory system, but it is distinct. I cannot see what you have in your tenant. You cannot see what I have in my tenant. I will manage my tenant. You will manage your tenant. And on the top, Azure will manage our tenant. When I say Azure will manage our tenant, it doesn't mean that Azure will always see, okay, he has got these many users. Okay, he has got these many users. No, Azure is not spying on what you are doing. Azure is just managing the availability of directory services. Azure is just managing the fault tolerance, disaster recovery of it. Because Azure is the overall sponsor for this service or the owner for this service. So they have to ensure that the service remains available all the time. But Azure is actually not looking into your tenant and and seeing how many users you've added, what kind of permissions you've given them, what all applications you're running. Uh, that's not what Azure is doing at all. And that's where you have an SLA with Azure, or Azure has that policy. Okay, so that's Azure AD tenant. Um, I have seen even architects who have worked with Microsoft Azure for a couple of years are still confused between tenant, account, and Active Directory differentiations. So once again, when you sign up with Microsoft Azure, an account is created under your name. That account is saved in Azure Active Directory that Microsoft uses for authentication. Microsoft Active Directory assigns a tenant to your account, which you can use to manage your resources. That's how it works. Let's move on. Now, what is Azure Active Directory domain service? Now, this capability was not included in the beginning, and because of which people would not use Azure Active Directory. But today, Azure Active Directory provides you domain service as well, which means if you are a cloud-born organization, then you can have similar functionalities of on-premises Active Directory in cloud, wherein you can add, you can eat, and Azure also sells domain now. So you can purchase a domain from Azure and you can actually configure, you can actually bind that domain or configure that domain for your Active Directory. And then you run full-fledged directory services using Azure Active Directory. That's what this slide is trying to say. And once you add that domain, you can manage domain join, group policies, LDAP protocol, all authentication. That's what it says. And you can use these domain services without the need to deploy, manage, and patch domain controllers in the cloud. Now, that's the benefit. In an on-premises deployment, when you have a domain controller or an Active Directory server, you're responsible for the deployment, management, and patching and security of it. But for Azure Active Directory domain service, you are not responsible for it. It is the responsibility of Microsoft. So it's a great service now. Azure AD Connect. Now this is the service which basically synchronizes on-premises identities. When I say identities, it basically means human and non-human identities. Human identities are users, employees. Non-human identities are system accounts, computer accounts, service accounts. They are non-human identities. So this using this service, you can synchronize on-premises identities with Azure Active Directory so that you don't have to manage them at two places. That's what this service does. And this service also allows for single sign-on. So you will first use Azure AD Connect for the synchronization. Then you will use either either one of the federation service, which is pass-through authentication, password hash synchronization, or Active Directory federation service to federate the applications, so that you don't have to provide Azure credential. You only log into your system once, and then it basically creates a token, for that session, and you can log into any Azure service, including the Azure portal, without providing the password. That's federation is all about. You can read about federation in detail in your spare time. So that's what Azure AD Connect does. And guys, you already have this slide with you, this slide and the additional, storage account slide that I shared in our previous session, which happened on 9th of October, Saturday. Okay. Then comes Active Directory users. Now this is similar to on-premises directory users. There is no difference. So user represents an identity of a person or employee in your domain. A user has login credential and can use them to log into Azure portal. You can assign roles and administrative login to users. You can add users to group, which is what we did. You can enforce authentication method for users. You can in fact authenticate an additional factor of authentication for users. You can track user sign-in. You can track device user logs in from. You can in fact register their devices. So if the user is trying to log in from a device which is registered, then they will be able to log in. And if the user is using any other device, they will not be allowed to log in. You can configure all of it. You can assign licenses to users. So you can purchase M365 licenses in bulk, and you can assign them to users. Azure AD has two kinds of users. One is user, which belongs to your organization, and the other is guest user, somebody who belongs to another organization. So these are the two users. Now let's go and create users in Azure Active Directory and see how the experience is. So this is my directory. Once again, I'll click on active. I'll just type active and I'll see Azure Active Directory. This is the home page of Azure Active Directory. Now, if I go to users, I will not see any user other than the user that is the main user. I will say this is the root user because using this credential, this account has been created. So that's the root user. Now, what you can do, you can create more users here. You can in fact authenticate to your domain as well. So if you need to do that, you can come here in Azure Active Directory and you can come to domain registration, custom domain. This is your custom domain. Here you can add custom domain. So right now, when you sign up with Microsoft Azure, Azure gives you a domain, which is your, which the domain is on Microsoft. On Microsoft is the domain that Azure assigns. But if you want to create your own domain, you can click on add custom domain here. You can provide your domain name like this, cloudexperts.com. You can add this domain. Now, when you add this domain, you will need to verify your ownership on this domain. And how do you verify? This is what you need to do. So you basically need to go to your domain registrar, wheresoever you have purchased that domain, then you go to the DNS setting, and there you need to either create a text or Amex record with this configuration. The moment you do that, and then first you do this activity, then come back here and click on verify. Then Azure will verify your ownership with these credentials. So Azure will connect to that domain registrar, supply this credential, it will be matched with what you have just entered there, and this domain will be added to your Active Directory. Once this domain is added, what will happen? Then you can add users here. So example, I'm not doing this activity here because I already have this domain added to another Active Directory instance that I maintain. I'll show it here. So I'll log into my other Azure portal, other account. And I have authenticated my domain to this Active Directory instance or this Active Directory tenant. So if I go to Azure Active Directory here, you can see my primary domain is cloudexperts.com. So here I have added it. That's the reason I'm not adding Cloud Experts there. You can only use your domain at one place. So that's so this is where I have added it, and this is the process. So I'll go to just custom domain, and here I will see my domain. See, cloudexperts.com is here, and it's verified. And if we go to the previous, here it's Azure AD free. If I go to domain, custom domain here, I only see this. It is unverified. So I've added it, but it's unverified. But for the other screen, it's verified. So as long as it remains unverified, I cannot use this domain. I can only use this domain when I verify it. So I'll just remove it. So I've removed the domain. Now I'll come back to users. And as I told you that there are two types of users. One is member. Member is the user who is part of your organization. And the other is guest. Guest is somebody who belongs to an external domain. So let's create a user. So there are two options. You can click on new user. You can click on new guest user. Let's say I'll click on new user. When I click on new user, I get two options. First is create user and the other is invite user. This invite is guest user because you basically invite guest, and this create user is your domain user. So for example, what is my domain that Microsoft has given me, which is myid.onmicrosoft.com. That's the domain that I've been given. But if I create a user, the user will have this domain. This is similar to the user that I have created in on-premises directory. But if I go to my other Azure instance, and if I create a user here, then you will see the difference. See here, it says cloudexperts.com because I have authenticated to this domain. But I can also create user in the other domain, which is the default domain that has been given. So default domain is like your login credential, whatever you have given, and before .com it adds the Microsoft domain, which is on Microsoft.com. So that's the difference. I'll go back to the previous here, and I'll create a user here. All right, so let's create a user. So I'll create a user, let's say Sam, or I'll create a user for you, Prateek. Then you can provide the information. Then it says, now look at the experience if it is similar or is there a difference. So you provided all the information, then it says password, you can auto generate or you can create a password. Let's say I create a password. Then it says you want to add this user to a group. Right now it says zero group selected because we don't have a group. Then it says block sign in. You can click on yes. If you click on yes, it basically it is similar to creating a user account but keeping it disabled. So if I click on yes, it means that I'm creating this user well in advance, and whenever I need this user to actually access Azure portal and the applications, I'll just click on no. So block sign in, no. Then you can also put usage location, and so you can define from which location this user should be logged into. Every location has a set of public IPs which is maintained by INA, which is the International Agency for Management of Public IP Address. So I can also put location here that this user is in India and this user should only be logging in from India. Okay. Then the job information for this user, the job title, I can say that he's my Azure admin department. He belongs to infrastructure operations, company name, cloud experts. And you can also select manager for this user, that who this user reports to, and you can hit on create. So that's how you add users to your organization, and all the users will have the same principal name or same credential, which is Pratik and the your domain, whatever is there. But if I create a user in the other directory, here the user will have this credential. For example, I'll create a user here, or I'll show you a couple of users which is already there. These are the users, and if I just click on user type, you will see a couple of guests. Now look at the difference. Wherever you see a member is part of the organization. Look at the email address for member. I would say the UPN for member, atul@cloudexperts.com. But whenever you see guest, these are external users. These are the users who I have invited to my directory and who I have granted some level of access to my Azure portal and the services. And if you go to the right creation type, it will show you how these users were created. So for all the guest users, the creation type will always be invitation, that they have been created or they have been added in this directory by invitation. Right? And if you see any user type as member, then the invitation type will be blank, and you will see the company name there. And say it's already there because when I've added the domain, I provided all the information. So that's how you differentiate. So we'll go back to this. Now we'll add one more user. So let's say we add one more user as Henry. Let's say Henry. I don't need to provide the last name because it's not a mandatory field. The name is mandatory that I've provided. Let me generate a password. Okay. And I can type Australia. I can type, he's my network admin. He's part of the same infrastructure operations team.
He needs a pay rise.
Sorry?
He needs a pay rise.
All right. Okay. Company name, Cloud Experts. Great. And now I can select the manager because now I have a couple of users. So I can click on no manager selected here. and it will show me all the users who are there in the Active Directory or the users who have been synchronized from on-premises Active Directory. So I'll see both the users. Let's say I'll put Prateek as his manager and select. So Prateek Sharma is his manager. Then comes
What
yeah.
does that actually mean? You've assigned a manager. What does that actually? Is that just more of a hierarchical
It's
thing,
more of
or
a
is there
hierarchy.
actually a role? Yeah.
No, it's more of a hierarchy. Basically, what happens when I make Prateek Sharma as your manager, Prateek Sharma will be able to manage your access, manage your
Okay,
access to various resources. And in the
I see.
hierarchy, be shown as Prateek Sharma.
Okay, okay.
And
Thanks.
so I select him because you also have this option in on-premises Active Directory. When you go to a user property, you see all the options wherein you can provide user personal information, the domain hierarchy for the user, all the information. So, but it's just that there you have more options. For example, here if I go to a user, for example, this user, see, I have all of these options like dial-in information, environment information, account information, address information when I can provide the address, the general information for the user, telephone number, email, web page, and then the organization information that what is his job title, which department he works in, company name, manager name, all of the information. So it is similar in Azure. It's just that on-premises Active Directory has more fields, and Azure Active Directory has only specific fields.
Oh, good. Yep.
So I'll create this user also. So I've created two users who are member of this organization. Right now, I'll invite someone. So let's say in Henry, now I'm inviting you to my Azure Active Directory. Okay. Uh, so now when I'm inviting the user, I need to provide all of this information. So first, name, Henry, and now I need your email address because an invitation will go to this email address. Henry, can you give me your email address? Okay, I already have.
Oh, you got it? I was just going to type it in the chat if you
No,
don't.
already there. Just validate if this is
Oh, good. You got it. Yeah, yeah, that's correct.
okay. And then I can send a personal message. Hi, Henry. Welcome to Cloud Experts. I can, once again, I can provide all the information, for example, block sign in, no. Location I need to provide Australia, job title. Let's say you are my storage admin, department. Or I can put the department like vendor employee, whatever I want to put. Company name, I can put your company, your manager, let's say I can select myself as your manager. That's it. Invitation. Now what will happen? You will receive an email which will say that this organization or this directory. You will see my directory name, which is this. Rena
Yep.
00710 outlook.com. This directory is inviting you, right?
Okay.
So
Okay.
let's just log into your email account, open that email, and please share your screen so that other participants can also be invited. I've invited Pratik and Vaibhav also
Sure.
as user. So Pratik and Vaibhav
Okay.
will also receive an email from me on your respective Gmail account.
Yes, I can see. And I clicked on that link.
Okay, what you need to do, can you share your screen so that others can see? Actually, I cannot invite all of you.
Okay. Please give me access to share the screen, Raghu.
Just give me 1 minute.
Yeah.
Is it Vaibhav, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I've just made you host.
Okay. Yeah. So I got this email.
Okay. So can others see Vaibhav's screen?
Yep.
Okay, all right. Now, as I said, there are two ways to add users to your Active Directory. Either you create their account in your Active Directory, and typically we do it for employees. But when you have an on-premises Active Directory which is already getting synced, you don't need to do it. Those accounts will start to reflect in your Azure Active Directory by default. And then the other way is when you're working with vendors and partners, and if you need to grant them access to your directory and your resources inside that directory, then you basically invite them. So this is how you invite them. You go to your Active Directory, you click on new guest user, and you provide their credential, you provide their information. Email address is the main field. So you provide their email address. They receive an email like this. This email will say that you have been invited to this directory, which is this organization, which is the default directory, and this is the domain. And if you accept it, then you will be sent to this. So you can click on accept invitation. Now, when you accept invitation, what will happen? Uh, Microsoft Active Directory will actually log this information that yes, an invitation was sent to a user who accepted the invitation. So this user becomes part of your organization as a guest user. Now you type your password.
Yeah. Okay. I've gotten in.
Okay. Let's just look at his screen. Review permissions. So you're just it is just needs permission so that it can read your name, email address, and photo if it is there on your account. That's it. They don't need any special permission from your account. Now, what is happening? If you notice, Microsoft Active Directory is basically authenticating a user who has been created on Google domain, because this your email ID is at gmail.com. So you are a Gmail user and you're providing your Gmail credentials, but Microsoft is able to authenticate you. That's the capability of Active Directory, which is what I was showing in the slide, that it can also authenticate to external domains. So right now, that's exactly what it is doing. You click on accept, and then Microsoft Active Directory will start to authenticate this user who is part of Google domain.
Shall I click on accept?
Click on accept. You can see it only needs the permission that it is asking only your name, email address, and your photo if it is there on your account. That's it. It is not taking any other permissions.
I found I then had to go to the portal, .azure.com. I had some issues at this next screen.
All right. So you are logging into the directory now. See, you're logged in. So you're logged into the default directory of my default directory, basically. Right now, it does not have any option, so you're logged in. Now, can you type portal.azure.com in the browser? Hit enter. Yep, select your Gmail account. Now you're logging into Azure portal, but you will not be able to see my resources because I have just added you as a user, but I have not granted you access to any of my resources. Okay.
Yeah.
So now this is your resources. Can you click on your name once again? You need to switch directory. You're in your directory. So there are two directories that you will find here. One is my directory. The other is, see, this is my directory. You can switch to my directory. Now this is my directory wherein I have added you as a user. But inside my directory, if you click on resources, you will not find anything. You just need to confirm your email address once. And if you look at the notification to your right, it says you do not have any subscription assigned. Okay, great. Can you click on virtual machine? Can you click on virtual machine or type virtual machine in the field? See, there is no virtual machine. You don't see anything. However, you know that I have a virtual machine in my, in my subscription. So this is, so now I have just created a user and you are my vendor employee. Just assume for a moment because you're a guest user. Now what I'm going to do, I'll take, I'll take remote from you. Can you stop sharing so that I can take remote? Okay. Now I'll share once again and I'll show you how this all activity is done. This all activity related to Azure Active Directory is also one-time activity. But as an administrator, you should be aware of. So I'll share my screen once again. Now this is my Active Directory. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to grant you access. I can grant you access at the resource level or at the subscription level. So what I can do here is my screen visible first of all, but this is very important part.
Yes.
Okay, so this is my directory, right? Now what I can do, I can go to subscription. This is my subscription. I click on the subscription, and in the subscription I see this access control. I'll click here, and in the access control I get this window. Here it says grant access to this resource, add role assignment. I can click here or here, add role assignment, one is the same thing. Here I see all the roles. These are the roles which are available. We'll talk about these roles, but let me just add one role here. Now these are the roles that I have. So what I can do, let's say I want to give you reader capability. I will say you should be able to see, read all the resources that I have in my subscription. So I'll select reader. Now they have changed the view, or till when I logged into the portal a couple of days ago, I was at 3 or 4 days ago, the view was different. They have most recently changed it. So now this is like it. You will click on the add role assignment. It will give you this window. You will select the role that you want to add. So I'll select reader right now. I've selected this reader role. I'll click on next. Then it says, okay, who you want to assign this role? You want to assign this role? So select the member who you want to assign this role. So I'll select the member here, and I'll see all the people who are part of my directory, all the users, whether they are employees of my organization or they are guests. So for example, here's the guest. Was it Weber, right? Okay. So Weber, I'm just giving you, I've just selected yourself.
Okay.
Here. Now I'm giving you reader access. I can put some optional message if I want to, and then I'll click on next. It will ask me to review and assign, and I'll click on next and assign. So I'm assigning reader access or reader role to my subscription. That part is done. Now I'll stop sharing and I want you to share. Make host. Okay, you can share now.
Okay. Yeah, I'm here now.
Okay, you're on this page. Now what you need to
Yeah.
do, you need to sign out and sign back in. Now, it doesn't synchronize at times. You need to sign out and sign back in. Now WebApp is signing out and signing back. This time WebApp should be able to read or basically view all the resources that I have in my subscription, because I have granted him reader role at the subscription level. He's just signing in. Great. You
Okay.
can,
I'm in default directory.
you are in my directory basically. See
Yeah,
my,
yeah,
and see, you'll
I
see
can
my,
see.
yeah. This is my virtual machine, Active Directory Domain Service VM. However, I have given you reader rights, which means you can read the configuration of this virtual machine, but cannot make any changes. You can try. Stop my virtual machine if you can. Others, look carefully. That's okay. Select whatever option. I don't care. I know you won't be able to.
Failed.
Read the error, what it says.
Failed to stop the virtual machine. Error. The client with object ID have authorized does not have authorization to perform action.
So you don't have authorization. You have only been granted the reader role to my subscription. Now, this is the purpose of Active Directory. Active Directory has got hundreds of use cases, but this is one such use case wherein you can actually grant permission to Azure resources and services to users using Azure Active Directory.